Hey everybody, welcome back. I am pumped for today's guest because not only is he doing a bunch of really interesting things inside of a big brand and I know he's going to share a wealth of knowledge, but also this is a portfolio of brands. This is a really big company. We're talking about a company that started out drop shipping for all you drop shippers out there and are now above nine figures and absolutely killing it, where they have a portfolio of their own brands. We're talking about KNS International. And today I am fortunate enough to be talking with their director of operations, Justin Wall. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Samir. Glad to be here.
Would love for you to just kind of kick things off and tell us a little bit about KNS International and tell us a little bit about the brands.
Absolutely. I think probably my story's a little weird. I'll just kind of describe how I dropped into e-commerce because maybe it just gives more legitimacy to everyone's sort of journey in their career. COVID graduate, I was planning on graduating in experience design and management, going into more of the event planning, event tech space. Obviously, events don't happen in COVID. So I bounced into manufacturing and for 3 years, kind of figured out how to do project management, ops management, learn this whole space. And that ultimately prepared me to drop into an e-commerce role as a director of ops at KNS. And KNS is awesome. Like we've been drop shipping for 20 something years. We started out literally shipping anything we could under the sun. The story starts with drop shipping left-handed hockey sticks because I think our founder said, why not? And we built a business around this idea that, we can be the best in the space. And it was about 7 or 8 years ago, we started doing shoes and having a lot of success with shoes and realizing, hey, this is something that people love. Maybe we can do it better than anybody else as well. And you just have that entrepreneurial fire, that spirit. So we started to build a brand, and Journey Collection is kind of our women's line. That was our flagship. We've had a couple other micro brands and has since acquired Taft Clothing, which is a premium men's brand that actually started in Utah as well. And that's just become like our business, our passion. And that's what we love doing every day is shoes.
I love it. And you just said the best in the business. So I'm curious, potentially, how do you define success at the company, and how is it measured? Especially where you've got this big portfolio, you've also got all these little, not little, you've got all these other brands kind of underneath the portfolio. Yeah, how do you define success?
Yeah, so I'll take the more philosophical approach. I think Simon Sinek, in his book The Infinite Game, I think one of my favorites, he's like, you can't win business. There's no set of rules that says after this point you're the some ultimate winner, everyone's done, everyone goes home. So I've tried to actually start to internalize this idea that for us to be the best and to be most successful, it just means we have to be able to challenge what we were yesterday and show that we're becoming better than we were yesterday, and growing and progressing, both in the way that we do business, in our mentality around how we treat our customers and the quality of our product, all of those things together. But philosophy aside, obviously there are measures you've got to kind of use to figure out the answers. We've got a lot of financial goals that tell us we're successful. We are owned by private equity, so they have financial goals, and we know we're successful as we're meeting target and we're on track to reach kind of the payout at the end. So I feel like a lot of times at this point, it comes down to the financials and how much money can you make and how much can you put away for the business.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I love it. I'm especially because you're on the ops side. I get curious
Yeah.
on performance there and different aspects of that, right? Because I think it's if you do not have an operations person and you're listening to this podcast and you're a founder or a CEO, or like, get an operations person, unless that is 100% your skill set. If that's your skill set, then great. Then you're the ops person, and make sure you've got a marketer or someone else in your corner helping you grow the business. But that was the most important hire I ever made. And it's such an important role in every business. And so I'm curious, in your view, as in your position, like, what are the key performance indicators that companies should prioritize when assessing maybe their fulfillment operations, right? And how do these metrics kind of impact just the overall business success?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on the ops piece. I mean, I joined the team over a year ago. I think I was kind of their first official ops person, coming in with at least a little bit of ops experience. So, I mean, what I know is what I know. And granted, there's a lot more there for me to figure out over time. But I think the benefit is getting an outside set of eyes that looks at things from more of like a throughput and capacity standpoint. I think that's probably the biggest difference of an ops perspective versus finance or marketing or some of those. I'm gonna look at things like what's our on time and in full rate for fulfillment. Like, are we getting stuff out when it needs to get out? And if not, why? And I think that's the other benefit that comes with ops is you don't ever stop at the top level. You're going to dig all the way down to get into the details. There's tons of methodologies, right? You got Lean and Six Sigma, you got Kaizen, take your pick, but you're going to understand what's happening, kind of like get a pulse on the operation, know what's happening on the ground floor and the shop floor. And that's where you're going to be thinking and making decisions to help improve your throughput. So to kind of answer your question, when I look at the success of our operation and what KPIs to kind of use, probably the three biggest things are on time and full rate. And that's just a quick gut check of we're okay. The second is our cost per unit processing rate. And it's easy to just dump it all in together and say all the cost against what you shipped. There's a really clean number. So we like to use that. We can break it down by department too. But I find that the throughput rate for those departments, like your pick and pack rate, your replenishment rate, those are really critical to building a really clear view of what's happening on the shop floor and where your bottlenecks are going to be.
Yeah, that I love those. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like we've had this completely counter argument with so many guests at this point where some guests are like everything's about the customer, right? And Amazon's a prime example. Everything's about the customer. They don't care about the product, right? It's the customer experience. How can I optimize the conversion rate? How can I make the user experience the best, the returns, the deliveries, all that stuff, right? Then you got on the other side, it's all about the product, right? I got to make the best product in the entire world. It's going to speak for itself, right? Maybe Apple, even though of course they do have their experiences and their tech guys and everything else, but just for lack of a better example, everything's about that unboxing experience and just right making the customer happy from creating the best product ever. I'm
Yeah.
curious, right, as you're kind of in this position of both a little bit. You're like, hey, we've got these brands where we are trying to make these incredible shoes and this incredible product, but then fulfillment, everything else, the time it gets delivered, all that kind of stuff. Is it a balancing act for you? Are you like, hey, there are key aspects here that if I focus on that, it's going to develop into
Yeah.
meaningful growth? Like, I don't know if I'm asking it the right
No,
way, but I'm just
yeah.
kind of curious your thoughts on it.
So I think you can have all of it. And hopefully I'll be the peacemaker that gets everyone on the same page here. But I think if you're having to compete with the product experience and your customer experience and the success of your fulfillment operation at the same time, something might be wrong. And maybe that's the first red flag. I think if each team in your company it has the mentality that we are going to have the best craft, whatever that may be, and spends their time really focused on just polishing and perfecting it, it flows through the sequence in time and it has the effect that it needs at the appropriate time. Like when I'm trying to get orders out, I don't necessarily want to be thinking about the product per se and being worried about like maybe I shouldn't ship this product. Does that make sense? So have your product team be the absolute best they can be and make the best product. And when they give it to you, then you can be the best fulfillment operation that the world's ever seen, right? And get that thing out. I think a lot of times, like service rates and delivery times now are becoming the biggest thing, the Amazon effect, right? They want it in two
Yeah.
days, they want it this morning. Like that's where operations and fulfillment, I think, has to really dial down and figure that out. But knowing that ultimately, as long as things get out on time, that's a big part of the customer experience. So it is a balancing act, but I think we can trust the rest of our team to help balance it for us.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I love that. Thank you for being a peacemaker, Justin.
You're welcome.
I mean, but it is like it's you're balancing the customer experience, you're balancing operational efficiencies, cost effectiveness, right? You're kind of touching upon a lot of these aspects, right? So, I
Mhm.
mean, as right as you're kind of looking at all this, right? I'm sure you have access to a lot of raw data. And so how do
Yes.
you take that raw data and kind of try to sink it into actionable insights that do drive improvements in operational efficiencies or cost effectiveness or other aspects of the business?
Yeah. I think to exactly to that point, if you can layer in some customer feedback data, layer in some like products, if you can kind of scrub the internet for wherever your product's being sold to get return what ratings, reviews, right? Just get that raw qualitative data. You can start to derive those insights. But I like how you talk about raw data because I joke that I like to swim through our data lake, just of the all the unstructured stuff and just like, what am I gonna find today about insights? That was kind of how I started a year ago, and I've learned a lot about the business doing that, but it does take a lot of time. So understand the importance of structured data. This is where I'd love to do like a shout out for our systems engineer guy because he's 20 and he is a whiz when it comes to all things data and like that is his craft and he has like perfected it with passion. This kid is amazing, but having someone who understands your data, where it's coming from, how it's structured in meaningful ways, you can actually make really insightful connections that tell you a lot. For example, when we were looking at like our average quantity per line on our orders, what the differential between single item orders for shoes versus multi orders, when we started getting down into it, we're like, oh, hey, 5% of all of our orders are a half size different within the same style and color, or they're the same size, they're just a different color. Like these are all getting ordered together. Let's go and put them together. And all of a sudden, our fulfillment rate goes up because we know 5% of orders are all always going to be the same. So like, let's quit, spreading them out. That's the cool kind of stuff you can find is you can put structure to the data. So I would say, yes, gather as much raw data as you can, store it in a meaningful way, and then find somebody who understands it to structure it and display it for you. Because ultimately, it's no good if it's just sitting, on a server.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that because you've kind of touching upon, hey, there's these key performance indicators that no matter what size you are, you got to be paying attention to these things. But then, of course, the bigger your business gets, pivot tables are important, spreadsheets are important, charts are important. Every data point that you can possibly get access to literally is improving cost efficiency, customer experience, endless amounts of aspects of the business. And then you're just kind of
Yes.
weighing almost the 80-20 rule in a way, I assume, where it's like, where can I have the biggest impact for either the lowest amount of money that will then either help grow the business or help whatever it is, the bottom line, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. So one thing I'm curious on, because maybe your time there has given you this experience, maybe it hasn't, but regardless, your
Mhm.
insights would be very valuable, is I see this all the time where everyone is always having the hardest time choosing a new warehouse, a new 3PL provider, a new, right? They've either outgrown their fulfillment house, they're debating to take it in-house or not, but of course that's a ton of new costs, but could lead to efficiencies. There's
Yeah.
10,000, there's like a million providers in this country, and half of them you ask them what, and it's such a, I guess, thankless job, right? Because if you're not at 100%, like then it's unacceptable, right? I'm always expecting
Yeah.
them to be 100%. And so I'm curious, like if you have any maybe points or ideas that if someone is needing to look for, right? Maybe they're outgrowing their current
Yeah.
vendor or something like that, any provider. Are there key things they should try to look for that can, especially help them either, whatever it is, reducing costs, have growing pains, mainly just try to avoid going with the wrong one, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give two answers, and they're from different points of view in the business. So hopefully these are valuable. The first one I'd say is, first of all, you always need to know your data. You need to know the cost per unit fulfillment. You need to know your storage costs, like all of those basics. If you're using a 3PL, if you're doing it in-house, find the number because that's going to be invaluable for you. Having that, the second point that I would make is it might not be appropriate to bring fulfillment in-house. And the reason I say that is you need to decide what your strategic trajectory is for your business. This is actually a point that we went through extensively as we were building a strategy for KNS. We're like, are we a dropship company or are we a brand? And the answer to that influenced a lot of what we were going to do in order to help us grow and scale over the next 5 years. For some brands starting out, it might not make sense and maybe you just never want to touch it. But what I would say is whoever you choose to do fulfillment, make sure they have a really solid understanding of their own operation, the seasonality, what their peak of peak looks like, what the contracts state as far as, what's your capacity, and then they're not going to fulfill any more of your product. Like all these things are starting to drop in as everyone moves back into 3PO model. And then I'd say what's their long-term vision for automation, robotics, all these buzzwords. And I could talk a ton about robotics because we just went to a trade show, Modex, and learned all about this for our own operation and, what makes sense and frankly what doesn't. So that was really eye-opening for us too.
So you've already placed an order for 1,000 new robots, right? I
We
assume.
not
You've
quite
got you've
to
got like two in the
Amazon's
office with you
humanoid.
right now.
For a second, I wanted to put everybody in the warehouse on those little hoverboards, the little like Segway standing skateboards, and have them tow orders that way. And I'm like, that'll just help our throughput. That'll make us so much faster. And people rightfully shut me down, but man, I'd be on bots so fast.
I love it. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. There's one of those viral videos that came out recently, and the guy was riding that, not the one wheel, traditional one wheel, but it's like, that one wheel that you sit on, and he's like literally
Oh
at the
yeah,
Starbucks counter on it. He's got the VR headset, the AR headset on, Apple Vision, and then he's like literally just like grabs his coffee, turns around, and he's like on this little one, this little one wheel thing out the door in 2 seconds. I'm like, they're like the future's already here. I'm like, dang, yeah, it's kind of true. It's kind of true. So you brought up a good point,
yeah,
though. I am very curious. Like, how are you approaching this integration of robotic automation within fulfillment operations? Just ensuring, right, it complements human
yeah.
capabilities, right? Because we've all heard all the Tesla stuff, right? Of him doing too much robots and then it causing problems and everything else. How are you
Yeah.
going about that, and how are you approaching that?
So I'd say we probably expedited the process most people experience when they're asking, should I start doing robotic automation? So at this stage, full transparency, we have been fully scoped by three, maybe four different robotics automation providers and have struggled to find the right thing that's actually going to have a return for us. But here's typically how this starts. You're struggling finding labor, especially when you need labor, and you're having a really hard time managing the labor when they're in your warehouse. And I say managing as in like maybe you don't know your throughput rates, maybe you don't have clear rate expectations, or people aren't consistently meeting those and so your cost is fluctuating a lot. Robotic automation is like primed to fit that niche need and solve both those issues. The challenge that we ran into is we moved into a new warehouse a year and a half ago where it was pretty much new build, sky's the limit, what do you want? And we built a warehouse that was really efficient for one particular kind of picking and packing and storage. And then we filled it with product. So now we can't move. But what we found is Utah is different than most places. We actually don't have a labor shortage here. We have a surplus, which is totally backwards from what I hear talking to anybody else. But we've also found a way to manage our team pretty effectively, and it's a lot of just communicating clear expectations, showing their productivity rates versus the team, just making that available so that the team understands where they need to be and what they need to do. And then on the back end is just relentless pursuit for continuous improvement, operational excellence. Like what can we do today that'll be better than yesterday? And we actually found ourselves with a pretty efficient pick rate, pretty low cost per unit for fulfillment, and the robotics companies were having a hard time beating it. And it was the most frustrating thing because I'm sitting here like, you can't tell me that what I have right now is as good as I can be because that's going to drive me nuts. There's got to be something else. So of course, if we tore out the racking and redid something, naturally, yes, we can do something else. But that's our story. That's the irony, and I think that there's still an opportunity. So we're still working on that. But when you're looking at robots, like picking orders isn't a career. It's not a life passion. Robots are great to replace the stuff that's mundane, that's dangerous, that's dirty. Like they can do that just fine. And I say absolutely, let's give people jobs and work that's a lot more ergonomically pleasing, less stressful, and complements, like you said, complements the human work with the automation in a beautiful way.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it is one of those jobs, right? You're
Yeah.
you know, I had a lot of buddies in college doing those jobs, working at FedEx and UPS and all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, absolutely, I get it, and it's hard because some of those communities rely on it. Kind of, you're alluding towards that a bit. I think, even so. But on the other
Yeah.
hand, yeah, you can work your way up and be the person controlling the robots versus, yeah, doing the same mundane task kind of over and over again. I mean, I think
Hmm.
my number one takeaway from this so far is that you and I are going to go into business and we're going to get robots to ride segways.
Yes. Gonna be
Perfect.
perfect.
I can't wait. I'm curious, like, what technologies or tools are you using to like gather and analyze and visualize all that data?
Yeah. And then also just another, note on this idea of data collection, like, it's not as easy as just dropping a robot in the warehouse. You need to have a really solid data stack so that it can work with that. So as much as I'd love to just release an army of those Amazon bots, like we've got to make sure some other things are in place. So I think this is really valuable. I will say I hope nobody is still using paper pick lists just as a process, for a lot of reasons. I'm sure that there's probably a reason to use it still. I haven't found it. I'm happy to argue that with anybody. But you got to get off of paper. You've got to find a system that's going to manage a lot of that work for you. So our WMS, use a WMS, period. Our WMS allows us to gather a lot of data on the back end. And so I can get down to the person, the time, the task, the place, all of that to start to understand some of those throughput rates. I can also start to aggregate orders by sales channel, to understand when those are dropping, when they fluctuate, what our on-time rate is for them. You start to get these structured in a way like we use a SQL database, and then we populate a lot of this data into Power BI to visualize it. There's a million and one tools out there that'll do all of that for you and store it in the cloud. If you're just starting out, you don't want to try and go back, like go find somebody that'll do it for you. But then we found some other tools that help us forecast some of our planning, like Anaplan gives us a little bit more ability to have a precise inventory forecast, sales forecast, and those are actually invaluable to forecasting our labor throughout the year. So, like, it took a lot of time to build up to that point where now we can plan for a really lean workforce to carry out the rest of the fulfillment for the year. So I'd say like your systems are critical, but choose systems that give you data and then find a way to put that data together. Hopefully that answers the question. I can probably clarify though.
No, it's super helpful, and it's so silly because this is one where we've made this mistake of assuming, hey, we're crushing it for this brand. It's growing really fast. We're doing a great job. Clients real happy. Grew from 7 to 8 figures. We're growing from 8 to 9 figures. Whatever it is, right? We're crushing it for them. We assume they've got all their ducks in a row. Until in the middle of the summer, we find out we're out of stock of 3 of the best sellers, and we're going to be out of stock for like the next 2 months, and it's the peak of the summer, right? And then it's like, oh no, we had this
Yeah.
trajectory, we had these plans, right? We were scaling. Like now, it hinders everything because performance is going to drop from all the marketing we're doing and everything else. Customers, like now we have to put a whole entire new plan together to make sure that we're on track. And you have to plan for those orders. You have to plan to make sure that you're getting things on time, right? That you're not going to get out of stock, especially if those best sellers. Kills me. Can't tell you how many times it's happened to us.
Yeah.
And it's so important. So absolutely, to your point, if you're able to have that data and use those tools available to you, I feel like it's so important, and it sucks because I know the switching costs are brutal. We're working with one client right now to implement NetSuite and a few other things, and it's like, oh, it's so hard,
Yeah.
right? It's so difficult. But once you have
Yeah.
it, it's there, right? And I mean, maybe I'm curious a little bit on should someone be looking for something that they can grow into as opposed to
Hmm.
going with something that like may or may not kind of fill their needs now, but then they're where their trajectory is, right? Because you've touched upon the goals side of thing, which I really appreciate,
Yeah.
right? Of just kind of like, hey, every business has different goals, and that's totally okay. But if you're on this
Mhm.
trajectory of growth, maybe you're venture backed or something like that. Yeah, do you recommend kind of going with something, hey, this is going to be a little bit pricey. We're going to take a hit, but we're going to have this data and we're going to be able to grow into it and we're not going to need to switch 2 years from now.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing because it totally depends, right? Size of the business. So manufacturing company I worked for before, very small startup entrepreneur, and but we're in a regulated industry. So at the same time that we want to find a cheap system that's flexible that'll work for us, it also has to be compliant to a laundry list of different organizations. So you end up running back and forth. I think finding a tool that can work for you in the right way is probably the biggest and the most important thing. Knowing that everyone has got some ability to display some data on the back end, and everybody's always trying to build those out, and build better reports. But I think you got to be careful. You got to right size your system. You don't want to pay for NetSuite if you're trying to just get a few hundred orders out, right? You got to find something that's the right size. That'll scale with you for a while. And the reason I say that is if you can chart out your growth over, 5 or 6 years, obviously excluding like hyper growth, and obviously that throws a wrench in a lot of things, but give yourself a runway for 5 years, pay that back, and then evaluate your business at that point because you might be doing something new, something different, and your needs have now changed. So I think you got to keep that horizon just a little bit closer. Get a contract for a couple of years, get yourself a good price. But I think you gotta pay attention to what else is out there because, technology is constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. And if there's a better system and a better thing for you and for your business that makes you more strategic or competitive, you got to be willing to make the jump, right? I think if you have the right people on the bus, that transition can be pretty easy.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. I like that. I mean, and at the end of the day, exactly what you're talking about, setting goals, making sure you know where you're at, talking to an expert, even if it's a consultant, right? You could kind of
Yeah.
figure that out, right? Depending on your size and just trying to figure out where you're at.
Hmm.
Reach out to someone who's already done it at a bigger company that's maybe in a similar niche or something like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure Justin's not going to give away
Yeah.
his trade secrets, but on the other hand, obviously, it's very obvious that he's got a wealth of knowledge as it pertains to all of this.
I try. I had to change my opinion on business consultants because they really are they're really valuable if you get the right one in the right industry. These guys just marinate in the space that you've got questions on. They know everything. Like they know what everyone's doing. Just pay them. They're gonna make it so much easier to get to where you want to go faster. So I will put in that plug.
It's true. No, absolutely. I mean, and it is. You got to be careful. Absolutely. You got to be careful. Get a referral,
Yep.
find someone in your industry. Like this,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm with you. I
We
mean,
do it all. We do it
yep.
all.
Yeah. So you have to be very careful. I am curious though, we've kind of talked about quite a few things here, but we're definitely, we've talked about some of the customer experience and aspects as it relates to that, as well as, right, like, what's going on the fulfillment side and what you're doing there. I'm curious, especially as, you're in the shoe business, shoes, there's a lot of variables to that. I'm sure you're always dealing with returns, high return rates and all that kind of stuff. Cause anything in the
Yeah.
fashion world, no matter what it is, you're dealing with returns and everything else. And I'm curious, just kind of as this customer expectations continue to evolve, right? Where you pointed it out, the Amazon effect and everything else. How do you anticipate the role of customization and personalization, which is a very hot topic, and it's only going to continue, I think, becoming bigger and bigger, depending, especially in the fashion industry. So, how do you anticipate the role of that
Yeah.
customization and personalization within the fulfillment process, and potentially like what challenges does this present, or opportunities?
Yeah. So I'll give some manufacturing perspective, which is how we've approached our fulfillment operation, which I think helps. But anytime in manufacturing that you're investing in equipment, in line setup, in all of those things, you're looking to do one very specific thing and do it well. And the challenge comes when you want to throw something in that you're not built for. And I'll say it like that because, of course, like if someone wants us to, put their product in a box and into another box and throw like confetti or something on it and pack it, we'll do it. We're just going to charge you a ton of money to do it. But then as soon as you have 10 people asking to do that, you're like, all right, let's kind of evaluate our life choices here. So what I would say about customization and personalization within the fulfillment process is to find a system, find equipment that will give you the flexibility within a standard process. So like I'll use printers, for example. Like if you wanted to ingest a photo and print a photo as part of the fulfillment process of the person or the gift or whatever it's going, right? Having one piece of equipment that can print your pack slip and your marketing insert and a photo and whatever you need, just spit it out automatically through the fulfillment process, that's gold for you. And then you just are setting up rules for if I sell it on Walmart, this is what it does. Or if I sell it on Amazon, this is what it will spit out. But no one is having to make choices and no one is having to have multiple touches in the process. I think those are the biggest things for me. As soon as someone has to find something different and put it on an order, their rates are going to drop. We want to preserve the rates because it's cost effective, but it's also easier for people just to be in a rhythm. So get the right kind of equipment that will help people stay in rhythm. You can do a lot with customization through technology and not have to, expand too broadly out of that. Now, I do recognize that we're a shoe brand and we can actually ship in our shoe boxes. So we don't have a lot of reboxing. We don't have a lot of extra, printing and fluff. The Taft brand has a more premium pack process, so we see it there. But I know some people have to deal with that. But I would say whatever you can do to align things into the same process would be valuable.
I love that. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I my favorite one was CCS, which is like this one of the biggest online skateboard companies. And I customized everything. The wheels, the trucks, the grip tape, every aspect of that board was I get to choose, right?
Yeah.
And right as when they finished it, they sent me a text with the picture of my board. Like, hey, your board has been built. It's about to be shipped out to you. And exactly like you're alluding towards, as long as like that's a cool customer experience, right?
Yeah.
I got the text message and I was pumped. Oh, it looks so cool. Oh, it's on its way. Woohoo. But as long as that doesn't take up, and then you're looking at that data, right? What's the customer experience look like? What's the sticky point of all of this, right? Versus, of course, it's going to take our staff a little bit extra time to take that photo. But as long as you have the systems and processes in place to make it effortless in a way, by just saying, yes, this order is done. Here's the picture and done. It's like a extra 3 seconds.
Hmm.
Great. It's awesome. But if it requires too many steps and it requires this person 3 extra minutes to take this photo, upload it to this random place, do this, figure out where the order number is, it's not worth it in that way, I'm sure. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess if your brand is really like customization heavy, personalization, and you're kidding a lot of the product before it's really done, yeah, make that your process. You're gonna have to pick one of each of these anyway. So that really doesn't impact you at all. You just get to pick something more specific for the person. I think that's kind of cool.
yeah, absolutely. As we wrap up, could you share maybe one key piece of advice for companies looking to optimize their operations and gain a competitive edge?
Oh, yes, I'll share a couple things. Hopefully it's not just I don't know, dumping tons more of information. Hopefully this is valuable. But the biggest thing for me, like when I walk out of work every day, when I'm making decisions, sending emails, I'm like, I hope that I have good information. That's the biggest thing. You've got to trust the data that you have, and you have to know it. And if you know it well and you can trust it, you can do a lot with it. So that's say number one, make that your baseline. And then once you have that, then to start kind of diving into your metrics. Break it down as granular as you can. Find a way to track it and find a way to display it because it'll tell you a lot about your operation, and those are helpful to give you new insights of things that you can change or different steps you might be able to take. I think when I think of strategic advantage, just since we went through this process recently, the technical term, what I think you're alluding to is like whatever you're doing is rare. It's really difficult to imitate and it's extremely valuable and you're organized in a way that you can deliver on it. I think for a lot of people, that's your labor management. If you can have your labor management plan like rock solid, you can weather a lot of storms and deal with a lot of variability in demand. One thing that we have found is we can sort of blend the demand of different areas, like our returns processing department with our pick and pack, because we'll spike on a Monday for pick and pack, and maybe we can just wait on returns. We're just not going to do anything on Monday, but they are flexible and can work with us, and that helps us stay really lean. I'd say know your data and find a way to manage your labor workforce really effectively. And I think that puts you in a really great spot.
I love it. Yeah, great advice. And it is. It's a hard. It's not an easy job. I know you got your work cut out for you. You're doing. I love what you're doing. Great brands that I highly recommend everybody to check out. I mean, the Journeys collection looks really cool. I know my fiance immediately was on it and was bugging me to get some orders here. So secretly, I might ask Justin for a discount when we get off this call. But last question, real quick. I ask everybody. You already dropped Infinite Games, so I know you're a Simon Sinek fan, which is great. I am as well.
Yeah.
But is there one business book maybe that's, changed your life or career the most, or something you're reading late?
I mean, it's funny that you say this. On my LinkedIn, I just dropped a post. I did 23 books last year. Just
Ooh.
all the things. And I probably shouldn't have done as many because I don't know that the recall is there. But there were like 5 that were just fundamentally shifted. So yes, Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, absolutely. I think Again by Adam Grant also just put a total shift on the assumptions that I have made, the opinions that I have, and realizing that a lot of them were based on nothing. That frees you in a lot of ways to be open to new ideas, new ways of doing things, and to talk with people, more effectively. I think Good to Great by Jim Collins is always a good pick. And then Range by David Epstein. Range confronts the 10,000 hour rule in, I think, a valuable way, because a lot of times we're not dealing with the same kind of problem day in, day out that 10,000 hours will like make us the best at. I think the value of analogies and being able to pull from a wealth of experience in other areas actually makes you more productive in your work. So I'd say those are probably my top picks. Those are worth the read for anybody.
I love it. I love it. I was just speaking to a group of students earlier today, and I was encouraging them like liberal arts degrees are gonna make a big comeback in a big way. I mean, you just said it. Why generalists triumph in a specialized world? I mean, yeah, I'm with you. But the Think Again sounds great. I've not heard of that, and the power of knowing what you don't know. All right, sounds like a lot of fun. Well, thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate the time, the insights you've provided. If anybody wants to reach out to you, I think you already plugged your LinkedIn. Is that probably the best place for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. I always love talking shop. Just reach out and I'll see what I can do to help.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, Justin.
All right, Samir. Pleasure.